The funny thing is, I don't actually consider myself an artist, although I consider this edible art, but I think that's what's fun about it, that it's so easy and approachable that anybody can do it. Hi, I'm Laurie. I'm also known as the Icing Artist, and I have a YouTube channel where I make amazing desserts. Today, I'm really excited to share with you all the fundamentals of cookie decorating. I especially love cookies because I find them to be like little canvases. Literally anything you can imagine, you can create it on a cookie. The first cookie we're going to do in the wedding theme is going to be a heart. Now, I've already flooded it with a dusty rose icing and let that dry. And now we're going to go over it with some piping techniques. So I'm going to come up. I'm just going to do some hand piping to start off with. And just create a few lines. As you can see, I kind of touch the cookie at the beginning of the line, come across the whole line, and then when I'm ending it, I kind of touch it again to finish it off. Now I'm going to do some piping floral. So for a leaf, I'm just going to kind of come across that way and just kind of jot out like this on both ends. Like that. Maybe add one to the end. And do the same thing kind of coming across the bottom. And this I'm doing all with no piping tip. The majority of what I do with no piping tip because I find that helps the cleanup so much. And you can do everything with the same kind of size. But the next color I'm going to grab does have a piping tip, so we can create more texture. So in this bag, I just have a 101 tip, which is a very small petal tip. And with the fat side kind of down towards the cookie, I'm just going to pipe a couple ruffles. That's going to be the back of my flower. And then for the front of my flower, I'm just going to do the same thing. Ruffle in front of it. Now I can go through, going to add a little bit of greenery just to the bottom of the flower so it doesn't look like it ends in nowhere. And then I just have a number 16 tip here. That's just a really small star that I can go on and add a couple little kind of flower buds. I love this because, like, for one, this design is so customizable for any kind of color scheme in an event, but it's so simple and it shows you how you can just really like random shape piping, but it creates cute little flowers. Let's move on to the next one. I was inspired by this stencil that had love right here, and I thought that would look really cute on kind of a mason jar look. So I'm going to lay that right on top of my cookie, trying to center it the best I can by eyeballing it. And I'm going to take a stiff consistency of white, and then I've got to try to hold it in place. So I'm resting my hand just against the cookie while holding the stencil with my thumb. And then I'm just going to come across the stencil. A little nerve-wracking, but it turned out really cute. And if you mess something up, you can really just wipe it off and start again. So don't be scared. Now that that's done, let's add the floral details. So the same way that we did last time, I'm just going to add some kind of string. I thought these would be really cute kind of rustic cookies, so I'm going for that kind of burlap look. And I'm going to come across almost like pieces of twine. I can see here where my line broke, so I'm just going to come in and just fill that in. And then almost like there was a bow there, I'm just going to do a cute couple little squiggly lines kind of coming down. And then for the top of the mason jar, I could do the lid in a different color, but I wanted to keep everything really clean and white. So I'm just going to add some of those lines that you would have seen on a lid. In white, and then using the same technique, I can add some cute little florals. Let's start with the greenery. You do have to be careful here because right now I'm piping on top of wet icing. But as long as I'm careful not to bump it, I can just kind of carry on with my design. But of course, if you're making a lot of these ahead of time, Then you can just do one stage for like, 10 cookies and then kind of come back through and do the next one. So you're not designing each cookie, you're just kind of working systematically. I love that I'm just piping random little blobs here, but they look like leaves. If you're doing a lot of piping, you might notice that your hand starts getting a bit shaky. So does mine. Don't worry, that's completely normal. And you can definitely forgive yourself if you've done a little bit of a mistake or something. You can cover it up. Like if I've got a little line here, I could add a little extra flour or something. Nobody's going to know. The thing is that I noticed whenever I create desserts, like I'll see all of the mistakes I did, but nobody else sees them. So forgive yourself because nobody cares. Okay, like how cute is that? Come on. Let's move on to the last one in our wedding theme, which I'm going to show you a whole different way to ice a cookie. I just take a little bit of stiff white icing. I just brush it across my cookie using a spatula. I want to make sure I'm kind of covering up the whole cookie first before I start scraping off more icing to create the texture I'm looking for, because I really need it fully covered. Kind of going in all different directions, trying to get a full coat. Now that I have that, I can kind of come through and I just want to scrape off little bit by little bit. And at this point, I'm only going side to side. Because when you ice a cake, that's kind of the direction you'd go in. So that's where you'd see the spatula lines. Just going side to side, scraping off a little bit more icing with each pass. And you can see it kind of coming together now. Now with naked cakes, you usually see some of that cake fully coming through. So I'm going to go even harder and really come through and try to scrape off some. But if I've scraped off a little bit too much, I can just kind of like add it back and play around with it until I've got the exact look that I'm going for. I like that look. You can see how you can get kind of carried away with it and just keep going over it over and over and over again. But really the imperfect is perfect. Now to bring into the same theme of the other ones that we've created, we're going to add on those little floral designs. And what I love about this cookie is you do not need to do that first layer and let it dry and come back. This one, you can just do it all in one go. Same little florals, just kind of going back and forth. I love this for a wedding because this would be perfect for a bridal shower or wedding favors or anything like that. And you can do them with the exact same color scheme or theme around the event, but you can take these same techniques and apply them to any kind of celebration. Random piping. And then add on. I'm just making sure because my piping bag's been sitting here that I'm taking off any kind of crusted royal icing that could be on that tip, clogging it up on me. Usually if I'm not doing the cookie right away, if I'm in between things, I'll just wrap a piece of damp paper towel around it so that way it doesn't dry out. Couple more leaves. And it's done. Love how these ones turn out. And I love that they're all so different, but they match perfectly together. That they all have like the theme brought into them, but like in a different way with the colors and all the stuff. I really think they're cute.
Hi, I'm Derek.
I'm Michael. Today we're gonna teach a class on how to make a centerpiece. I think what we do is romantic and loose and organic, and we try to let the flowers and the product really speak for itself. The first thing that we're going to talk about is how to process roses. Roses are one of our sort of staples in our arrangements. It's a great filler. We use a lot of them. And right now we're going to talk about really how to clean these up and how to treat them. So one thing that you want to think about when you're buying roses is if they're really tight and you're going to be prepping for an event, you want to make sure that they're in peak openness before the event when you're arranging. Roses are actually cut when they're buds, and then they start to open up at the market. So if they are closed like this, one trick that we do is we'll fill a bucket up with warm water, and that's going to increase the water flow up to the flower head. Another trick is also to clean up your roses and take off all the bottom leaves. And that's going to make it so that the water isn't wasted in the leaves and it goes straight to the flower head as well, which is also going to increase the lifespan of your roses. Another thing that we like to do as well, if you're arranging with a lot of really beautiful heirloom delicate flowers, a lot of these thorns as you're arranging can actually puncture some of the petals. So you also want to clean up the really big thorns as well. Unless that's a look that you're going for, you won't really see them. So just break off all the big ones. And then just before you pop it into water, you want to do a nice angled cut and then toss it right in. Anytime you pull a flower out of water, you want to make sure that you always do a fresh cut before you put it back in. The stems tend to oxidize pretty fast, and that'll make it so that the water isn't absorbed into the flower. So we're just going to clean these up. And I always like to keep the top 2 petals on. I think it's a lot nicer. It's just an aesthetic thing for me, but you can clean them all off if you want. It's really personal preference. So I'll just take off these.
And sometimes if the outer petals are a little bit brown, you can just peel those right off.
Yeah. Another thing too that you want to think about is always wash your buckets before you process your flowers. If you don't, you can definitely get bacteria growth, and that's also another cause for flowers to die a lot faster.
And we just use dish soap.
Yeah, just dish soap, just antibacterial dish soap is fine. And then also a little bit of plant food, depending how long they're going to be sitting in your studio, is also great. So a lot of different flowers take different techniques with processing. Now we're going to show you how we like to process our tulips. So tulips, they definitely start to sort of wilt and bend down at the market when they're dehydrated. But they're pretty great because then once you put them in water, they definitely perk up and they tend to straighten as well. So when you're processing flowers, any leaves that are going to sit in water, you want to remove, because those leaves sitting in the water are really going to increase your chances of bacteria growth, which, like I said before, will make your flowers die a lot faster. So just the bottom leaves. I actually love the way the top leaves of tulips look. I mean, you can keep them on, like I said, with roses if you want, or you can take them off. I like to keep them on. I think they're really beautiful. And then I will just do a nice little angled cut at the bottom and just pop them right in. Tulips don't need warm water. Really anything with a hardy stem like roses can use warm water to really pop the flowers open. Like roses, lilacs, anything with a nice woody hardy stem. Anything with a softer stem will tend to sort of get mushy in hot water. So you want to make sure that they go straight into cold water. So just clean these up here. Another flower that we're going to be using today is ranunculus, which you can definitely get in the spring. And we've already kind of gone through and cleaned these up for you, but just to show you, ranunculus usually have a lot of leaves on them. So just strip the leaves off. That's also going to increase water flow to the flower head. And then just also quick cut and then right into cold water. Ranunculus are great. They last a fairly long time. We find them to be one of our hardier flowers. Just make sure that over time that you're really changing your water out if they're going to be sitting for longer than a couple days. Just take them out, clean your water out, soap the inside, and then a little bit more plant food, and that'll really make them last a lot.
Sometimes when you're at the flower market and you see ranunculus, they look kind of like little tight balls. So you really want to give them a little bit of time to really open up and get that show-stopping effect.
I actually find that ranunculus look the best just before their petals completely fall off. So we definitely like to give ourselves a few days before we before we arrange with them for events. And then other flowers that we use and tips for processing. So here we have some peonies, and a lot of times when you buy your peonies, they'll come in tight buds like this. Now, it has a sugar coating naturally that sort of holds the petals together. So if you want them to open up faster, there are a few tricks that you can do. One of them is to submerge them in warm water just to get some of that sugary residue to come off, and that'll help pop them open. Another trick is to put them just in hot water because it does have a woodier stem, just like we did the roses. That'll help it drink and help it open up a lot faster. And then one other trick that we've done a couple times in the past, we don't always do because we like to give ourselves enough time for them to open, but you can actually put them in a really steamy, hot environment, and that steam will actually help break up that sugary residue and let them pop open a lot faster. And then just like the other flowers, we like to clean up the bottom leaves so they're not sitting in water. And then yeah, fresh cut and stick them right in. Here we have some passion vine. But same thing, just make sure that any of your leaves that you're arranging with are really cleaned up at the bottom. Just strip them off and then just fresh cut and pop it right back in water. I think that's the biggest thing to really remember when you're processing, is to make sure that there's nothing sitting in your water. You want to make sure that it's always just clean stem, fresh cut, and clean water.
Most of this should last for a few days. Some, of course, like our tulips, will last a bit longer. These are flowers that we would use likely in an event. So the lifespan is around 3 to 5 days once they're fully arranged. Once you have your arrangement completed, you want to make sure it's fully topped off with water, and then every day keep topping off with water to make sure that there's ample water for the flowers to drink.
My name is Emily Paluska, and I'm a botanical artist. I focus on recreating bits of nature, whether it's flora or fauna, and my main medium is using paper. I also use clay and paint to make the paper come to life. First thing that we're going to be doing, we're going to be starting from the center, moving out. So we're going to build our center of our flower and then move on to our petals. To build that pod, the poppy pod in the center, we're going to be using some spun cotton. It's essentially like a hard cotton ball. And then you're going to take your 18 gauge piece of wire, and we're going to start from the center again and move out. In this flower, we want to go ahead and take our spun cotton ball, and they automatically have a little hole in the bottom here, so you're going to be able to fit the wire perfectly inside. So I'm going to take my hot glue gun, and I am just going to put some glue here, stick this in, and then what I like to do is to just take my fingertips and remove some of that excess glue. One of the core things when you think about a poppy is they have those wild, sort of funky stems, and they're pretty thick. So to build a thicker stem, rather than use all of your wrist strength to build up this stem here, we're going to take an easier way out, and we're going to use this tubing here. This is just plain old aquarium tubing, but we're going to use this to thicken up the stem. I'm just going to take this aquarium tubing here, feed my wire into it, go straight up. Once I get to the end, I'm going to go ahead and make a cut. I'm going to go ahead and take my glue gun and actually put a little glue at the end just to seal the bottom. And now I've got the start of my center. And to get that stamen, we want to go ahead and paint that spun cotton because we don't want it to be white. So you can use any sort of dark colored green paint or even like a more lime green paint. And what we'll do here is take our paintbrush. This is just a green acrylic paint. And I'm just going to go over the spun cotton ball. And what you can do is you can let this dry. It doesn't take very long, say about 20 minutes. And then you can do another coat if you'd like, if you feel like it's not dark enough for you. But that's all it is. You're just painting that spun cotton ball. After I've painted my second round of green, and now I have it the tone of green that I would like for my center, I'm going to go ahead and create the pollen look. It's essentially a crosshatch pattern here. And we're going to create this by using this lime green floral tape. So if you've never used floral tape before, it's pretty sticky. So you essentially stretch it out to activate the tape, and then now it's sticky. And the reason why I like to use floral tape as opposed to using just a piece of lime green crepe paper is that it sticks. So it's not going to slip and fall off of your pod here, and it's just going to make your life easier. So what I'm doing here now is I'm just sort of stretching it out. So I've activated the tape and I'm twisting it. And I'm going to go out quite a bit. I like to keep it on my roll because I like to use one continuous strip. You can see this very long piece. And now we're going to create what would essentially be in real life the center of the poppy with pollen on top of it. I'm going to start slowly wrapping this tape. I'm going to go down a little bit to sort of build a foundation. You can see. And I'm going to wrap back up. And now this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to bring it over the top. And once I've brought it over top, I'm going at a diagonal. So essentially the first design you're going to want to make is an X. Then I'm going to wrap around to sort of secure this so it's not going to move around. And then once I feel like it's secure, I'm going to go ahead and cross over again. So now I have an X. And I'm going to do the same thing that I did the first time. I'm going to wrap a few times down here. This is going to bulk up this area. And then I'm going to fill in these spots. Essentially think about spokes of a wheel that you're making here. And just do it carefully. It can feel a little bit awkward with all of this tape and wrapping tight. After you do it a few times, it will be a breeze. I'm going to need some more tape, and this is why I like to keep it attached. So I can just keep moving down, and I can keep one continuous bit of tape here. And then I'm going to fill in my final spoke here. So now I have that shape that I want, the spokes of a wheel, and I'm just going to give this a nice, good wrapping to ensure that these are going to stay where they belong. Now I'm going to take my scissors and just cut this off. Set that aside. You're all done with the floral tape. Take your hot glue gun, just do a little bit down the rest of the tape and just wrap it flat to the wire. And you can adjust here. You need to shift things over. And then I like to just take a minute to press tightly down so that tape is sticking. So now I have my pod. The next thing that we want to work on are the stamens. So to do that, we're going to do a layered stamen with sort of a lime green at the bottom and then the yellow pollen sticking out at the top. I have 3 pieces. Remember when I showed you in the beginning how we stretched out the paper, and when we stretch out the paper, it changes the texture. So in this case, I've stretched out the paper all of the way, and I have 1 piece of goldenrod yellow and 2 pieces of this lime green. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to take good old Elmer's glue, if you remember this from school. I'm going to take this and I am going to put this purple glue all over one side. And it looks like this. So I've covered the whole thing with purple glue. Now I'm going to glue this to this yellow piece, leaving just a little hint of yellow above. Not even 1/4 of an inch, just a little bit of yellow peeking out at the top. And I'll stretch it a little bit and press down as well. Now I'm going to turn it over, take my last piece of lime and do the exact same thing. I'm going to take my glue with my second lime piece, putting the glue all over the strip. This is going to dry clear. And this makes it easy. You already did the hard part of figuring out where you wanted to line up and how much yellow you wanted to peek out. But now you're just going to line this up directly with where you lined up that first line strip. And I'm going to press down just like I did the first time. And so now you have this laminated strip of a goldenrod yellow peeking out at the top between two limes. So think about it like a cookie or a sandwich. So you've got the yellow inside and the greens on the outside. And then you're going to go ahead and let that dry. Now that yours is dry, we're going to go ahead and fringe it because you can see we have this nice fringed center. To do this, I'm going to go ahead and take my scissors and I'm going to cut down 2/3 of the way. So this is what you're going to be looking for in the end. You're going to turn this into this. You're going to want to make pretty thin fringe. But the most important thing to remember here is if it's not super thin the first few times, that's okay. If it's never thin, that's also okay. But what you want to focus on is making sure that you leave plenty of space at the bottom, because this bottom part of your fringe is going to be what we attach to the flower center. I always say this is the shelf, right? You want to have plenty of shelf space to attach it. So here I go. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go down just 2/3 of the way, remembering that I want to leave ample room for my shelf at the bottom. I'm going to go slow and I'm going to take care, keep the width of my fringe as even as possible. And I'm just moving my way down the strips. It does not have to be perfect. It's one of those muscle memory things that once you do it a few times, you won't even have to think about it anymore. And now I have my strip. We're going to go ahead and attach it to our center. So I'm going to go ahead and take my tacky glue in this case, and I'm going to put glue down that bottom base that I told you about that you wanted to leave intact. Now this is where we're going to put our tacky glue. Remember, a little bit goes a long way. You don't need a lot. I'm just going to make some dots down here. I'm going to take my pod and I am going to go right underneath the bottom. So I'm going to hug the bottom part of that pod. And that's why we build up that tape there, because it adds a little bit more bulk for this to rest on. You're just going to slowly go around. Now, two things to remember when you are applying Stammans that are important. You want to make sure that you're keeping this even, the bottom edges even. Now, you can see I'm wrapping it like this. I always say when you look up into the bottom of your flower, it should almost look like tree rings. Everything is lined up and even, because if you were to go down and then go up, you're going to have these big open pockets, which you don't want. It's not going to be a secure shelf for your petals. So you want to keep the bottom edges nice and even, and you want to make it tight, because as you wrap this around, these sort of glue or air pockets are going to kind of automatically come up. You can see as I'm wrapping around, I'm just pressing nice and tight, making sure that this is going to stay where it belongs. And I'll just take a second to really press tightly, making sure that everything's going to stay where it belongs. And you can let that dry a little bit. You can also open it up just to see how it's fitting around. And now I have my pod there in the middle. So now we're going to go into our petals. We're going to be using the 90-gram paper. Like I mentioned before, this is my favorite to use for poppy petals. It is the perfect texture for that ethereal look. So there's going to be 3 small petals and 2 large petals. And we're going to actually be able to cut them all at one time, which is nice. And there's no template for these. This is a freehand cut. But this is my first small petal. I'm going to just fold this paper right in half, and I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to curve this up. Then I'm going to go to the bottom and do the same cut, except I'm going to go and meet it in the middle. And just sort of round it out so the edge is smooth and not hard. So then you're left with, essentially it looks like a mushroom head. So you're looking for a mushroom head for the petal. So you've got this. Now let's do the second small ones together. So I've got 2 stacked directly on top of each other. I'm going to do the same thing that I did before, cutting from the top. Now I'm going to cut from the bottom, going for that toadstool look. And I'll round it out, open it up. And if you have any little hard edges here, you can go right in and smooth them out. So now I have my first 3 petals. And now I'm going to do my last 2 in the exact same way that I did my other small petals, which is cutting up from the sides and then cutting up from the bottom, meeting in the middle and rounding it out. So you're left with the toadstool look. Again, just trim if there's any rough edges. I'm going to show you how we can add pastels. So these are my pan pastels here. You can do any color. I often look at Google Images to get some nice sort of macro shots of different tones and colors and varieties of flowers. I'm going to use this lime green here. This is a pan pastel brush. You can also just use a makeup sponge or a paintbrush. I'm just going to get a little bit of the pigment onto my brush. And I'm going to take my first small petal here, and I'm going to make brush strokes down. It's about 1/3 of the way. And I'm really going to build up the pigment. I want it to really pop. You should feel creative license here to make things super pigmented, very light. You just want to have it be nice and stark white. That's also a great option. Now that I have my pastel on my first petal, we're going to shape it because remember, it's not going to be attached like this flat. We want to bring it and give it life. So you're going to take your fingertips and you're going to do little tiny accordion folds back and forth over the whole petal. Your hands are going to get some pastel on it, just to forewarn you. So in the end, it's like a little fan. And what you're going to do is you're going to be a little rough with it, but not too much. It's not that delicate. You can be a little bit rough with it, within reason, of course, but don't be scared to really manipulate it and move it and make it work for you. So it looks really nice and tight. And then what you'll do once you've folded it up like this is you're going to open it back up. And that's how you're going to see that beautiful fan. I think it looks like betta fish fins. And this is why I like to use this 90-gram paper, because this is how you get that shape. And now you have this beautiful petal. And what you'll want to do is, this is pretty loose at the bottom. So we're just going to give it a little glue. I'm just going to dot a couple dots down here and push it together at the base. And I'm going to bring it back like this. So I have this nice bottom edge here. And then to give it further shape, if you want, it's not something that you have to do. You can take that bamboo skewer that I mentioned earlier and sort of play around with it. You can curl it up. You can curl it back. You can go back and forth and get the petal the way that you would like it to look. So I like the way that this looks, so I'm going to stop here. Now we're going to put everything together. So we have our 3 small petals, our 2 large petals, and then we have our poppy pod with our stamens. I'm going to use hot glue for this. If you'd like to do tacky glue, you can. We're going to do our first 3 petals. Remember, we have 3 small and 2 large. So I'm going to take my first small petal. I'm going to just bend it back just slightly so it's going to cup those stamens a little bit more naturally. And I'm going to take my glue gun and I'm going to put glue just on the tail of that petal. And I'm going to go right underneath here so that the bottom edge of the petal almost hits the bottom edge of the stamens here. So it looks like this. This is petal 1. Now I'm going to take the second petal and I'm going to do the same thing. Now where I build this, I'm going to put it about overlapping about a little over halfway. That's where you would sort of line up your next petal. One thing that's really important to remember as you're doing paper flowers, and the mistakes that I made when I was learning myself, is I would get very focused on being at the perfect placement. If someone was teaching me something, well, what is the perfect placement? And one of the most important things to remember is to stop and look at your flower from above and to see how it's building. Maybe my specific one, I needed to go a little bit more to the left. Maybe with yours, you need to go a little bit to the right. But you're not going to be able to catch that unless you see it as you go, especially with hot glue in this case. With my final small petal, again, I'm putting the bit of hot glue right on the tail. I'm going to go right across from those 2 that are together. So now it looks like this. And when I have my hot glue, even though hot glue dries quickly, I'll leave it there for just a second and make sure nothing's gonna go anywhere else that I don't want it to. And now I have my final 2 large petals. And you're gonna do the same thing, glue on the tail. And you're gonna fill in these gaps that have been left by the small petals. You're gonna line it up in the same way. I'm gonna take my final petal and I've got my hot glue on, and I'm gonna go ahead and fill in that final gap. And now you can see, because it's hot glue, I can open it up without the worry of things falling apart. That I can see my poppy coming together. You're gonna take some green strips and your tacky glue. Don't use hot glue for this. You're gonna want your tacky glue. The hot glue dries way too quickly and you would definitely burn your fingers. Dotting glue periodically down the strip. So I've dotted 2 strips here because I want to be able to just pick up right where I left off and make it a nice continuous movement as I wrap my stem. I'm gonna go right underneath where all of this mess is. And I'm just gonna start wrapping, just like how I showed you how to wrap a plain stem. In this case, we're just wrapping a stem that's completed. So I'll wrap it a few times at the bottom just as an extra layer of security for the petals and just to sort of bulk this up a little bit. And then I'm just gonna keep wrapping down. You can see I'm using my right hand to control the wire and my left hand is working on controlling the paper. And I'm just moving steadily down. We're almost there, and see, now it's good that I had that second strip queued up because I'm all ready to go. And what is a little bit of a trick, once you get down here and it can feel a little bit awkward to keep wrapping from this way, you just turn your flower upside down, pick up right where you left off, and just do the same thing, except you'd be wrapping up, right? Because we have our flower upside down. And then I'll just bring it over the bottom edge, bring it down just slightly here, and tear. And then you can save this green strip for later. For our next flower, you can use it. So now that you have your stem wrapped, the last final step that you can do, totally optional, is to just sort of open up your petals a little bit more. You can play around with them now that they're in their permanent space. And this is why, particularly, I love using pastels for poppies, because that center just glows. And there you go. You've made your first paper flower.